Hello students, you're welcome to Information Privacy Engineering and Privacy by Design. This is chapter 4 of this course, and the title of this chapter is Information Privacy Threat and Vulnerability. So without much ado, let's begin. First and foremost, we want to look in the evolving threat environment. Why is threat becoming in computer space or in security space or in information space or in cyberspace? Why is information becoming a big problem? Why is the threat associated with information processing, transmission, reception, and all of this? Why are threats coming along with information as we advance in technology? Because the more and more we develop technology that can process information and disseminate information, the more and more privacy is being breached. The more effort we put in advancing the mechanism, the processes that can be used to facilitate the processing of information, the collection of information, the processing and the transmission and the reception of information, and then the more we have privacy breach. So there's a dichotomy between the privacy breach and information collection, information security, and information technology. So if we're looking at this, we have to have a trade-off. There must be a trade-off between the advancement in information technology and the breach in privacy, individual privacy. Advances in information technology, especially in the area of information security and cryptography, have led to the creation of new tools and methods for protecting privacy, because the more and more we develop information technology, then the more pressure we create that limits the privacy of individuals, the personally identifiable information. Hence, we have to find other methods and other ways of cryptographically protecting the information and at the same time protecting the privacy of personally identifiable information. So let's quickly look at the repurposing the collected data. You know, when we collect data can be used apart from the intended scope for which the data was collected. The data can be put into other uses. So an organization might collect all the personally identifiable information for one specific purpose, and the same organization may decide that those information be used for other purposes. Okay? They may decide that those information be used for other purposes. So let's take a look at the general examples of those organizations or those entities that can collect information, personally identifiable information, and use them for one purpose, and at the same time change the cost of usage and use them for other purposes. A good examples are businesses. You know, businesses want to use the personally identifiable information to direct targeted product offerings to customers, and also to be able to hire and place employees in the most cost-effective manner. So that they can maximize profit. Okay, they want to ensure that their product target their designated customers, and at the same time, the sole purpose why businesses collect information, and they also want to ensure that the employee that they hire are put in the best and most effective cost manner, so as to maximize profit and reduce economic risk through a better understanding of demand and supply in the economic chain. So that's for businesses. Business, they make use of information, they collect information, and they make use of these informations. Now, another group of entities that make huge use of information is the researchers. The researchers, whether at all postgraduate levels, like master's level, PhD level, postdoctoral level, fellowship, and also as an assistant professor, as an associate professor, as a professor, as a senior professor, at emeritus professor. All they do is keep using finding informations, personally identifiable informations, and making use of them in one way or in another way. So they keep collecting information and using them in order to advance the course of studies and to improve the existence of human beings. So we say researchers in different fields, they desire to use the personally identifiable information from one or more sources to derive statistical information such as the current status and trend, what is in vogue, what is in trend, what kind of people, what people think, what people are wearing, what people are eating, what people are discussing on social media. So you can collect these data. You can like the SPSS classes you had, live classes you had yesterday. You recall that those data were collected from different provinces in Canada, from all the different provinces in Canada, from British Columbia to Alberta to Saskatchewan to Manitoba to whatever, name them, to Ontario to Nova Scotia to Newfoundland. All of the provinces, they collected data on the age of people, male or female. They collected data on different parametric measurement scale. So these data can be used for research purposes to find out the health statuses of people. I think one of the significant finding from those research data was for health reasons, okay? But the data or the information are not only limited for health findings of people, what they eat, the health statuses. That it was not only limited to that. You can use it for so many other use. You can put them to other uses. So we say researchers, they collect information, they use them on one hand for one reason, and they use them on the other hand for another reason. Is that okay? Then the third aspect of organizations or institutions that make use of information in various scale and at various capacity is the government agency. The government agencies, they are actually agencies seek sources of personally valuable information to provide services, right? So that they can improve their services. For example, there are so many government agencies, like the central bank of any country is a government agency. All the institutions in the countries, they are actually government agencies, right? Like the stock exchange, like so many other things that you have in your country, which belongs to government, okay? Ministries and parastatals, most of these things are government agencies. Your telecommunication in your country, I'm not saying the private telecommunication, like the one we used to call in Malaysia is called the Telecom Malaysian, TM. Telecom Malaysia, they provide services. These are government agencies, they are owned by government, okay? All these agencies, they use personally identifiable information, and they seek for this personally identifiable information from different sources, and they get them and they can make use of them for different services. So information you gather can be used for so many purposes, right? Can be used to provide services, can be used to administer benefit and to enhance security, and so many things the government use these things for. Now, data collected for purpose can easily be used for different purposes in the future, unless the restrictions are both to database management system. Unless you've built restriction in your database management system that this data, personally identifiable information that has been collected, cannot be used. You created a restriction that these things cannot be used for other sources. They cannot be used for other aspects of information dissemination or processing. Okay? Then let's take a look at the means of collections of personally identifiable information. We already agreed that businesses, government agencies, and even the private individuals can continue to develop new mechanisms and methods, whether they're voluntary or they're involuntary. They can use all of these methods to obtain personally identifiable information, right? Now, let's take a look at the means, the method by which this personally identifiable information can be collected quickly. We have what we call the mandatory disclosure. We have the mandatory disclosures, just a number of contexts in which individuals are required to provide personally identifiable information. Like, for example, in your tax returns, you have to provide information about yourself. When you are doing fingerprint, you have to provide information about yourself. When you are doing DNA test, you have to provide information. So all these ones are mandatory. So they are called mandatory disclosure. You have to disclose. When you're doing your passport, when you're doing your international passport of your country, you have to provide these information. They are very mandatory. So all this one falls under the categories of mandatory disclosure. Okay. Another aspect of means or ways of collecting personally identifiable information include the incentivized disclosure. The incentivized disclosure. This one is an organization. We say in this case, an organization may provide an incentive to individual to disclose information, or maybe something like loyalty card, for example, to disclose their information. So they provide an incentive for those who can provide certain information. Maybe they want to use them for research findings, whatever they want to use them for, but they give incentives for whoever can disclose some of this the kind of information. And not only that, for example, when you are doing, there's this thing they call, when you're looking for, you tell people, okay, anybody who can tell me, we're looking for, when police is looking for anyone, for example, they can incentivize it, as in they can put a pay price on the person and say whoever can provide so information of this person, his whereabouts, his this, his that, then the person will be paid a sum of blah 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 blah. This is done most often than not in medicine. So this type of means of collecting information is called incentivized disclosure. Then we go to another means of collecting information. It's called the conditioned disclosure. The conditioned disclosure. Okay, in this case, in order to obtain some very good information or services, an individual must supply personally identifiable information. Example is like during election, when you're voting, you're going to provide your permanent voters card, PVC. You're going to provide some of these your information, right? And then when you are gaining employment, you don't have a choice. They are conditioned. These are called conditional disclosure. To the extent you have to give your medical status, your health status. When you are gaining employment, they have to know your blood type, your genotype, whatever sickness. If you have hepatitis B, they have to know. If you have HIV, all of this is, you have to disclose all the information about you. These are called conditional disclosure. Now let's go to another way or means or method of collecting personally identifiable information, and this is called the entirely voluntary disclosure. Entirely voluntary disclosure. In this case, people may disclose information on their social media, you see, entirely voluntary. It's voluntary. It's not mandatory. It's not like compulsory. You did it yourself. When you were opening your Facebook, when you're opening your Instagram, your Twitter, your LinkedIn, your TikTok, all of these things, during the process of opening them, you provide your information, your name, your email, your age, your date of birth, all of this. And you remember they are personally identifiable information, and some of them are even sensitive personally identifiable information. So you disclose them yourself because they are entirely voluntary. You decided yourself. Then another way, the fifth way of collecting personally identifiable information is an unannounced acquisition of information. Unannounced acquisition of information. In this case, an individual discloses the personally identifiable information, being aware of it. Like example, cookie. When you go to any website, they say cookies on the web browser will pop up, and see the site you say we use cookie. Click OK in order to continue. So you click OK yourself, and the cookie will obtain the software algorithm is programmed to obtain some of your information, and this is called unannounced acquisition of information. Nobody, you will not even know you've given your information the moment you just click OK to cookies on web pages. Now let's move on to the next phase. Now this is figure 4.1, a potential privacy threat. A potential privacy threat. Privacy threat happens at every facet of information dissemination, processing, collection, dissemination, and transmission, reception. So privacy threat can happen at every level. First of all, this data subject. The data subject is the principal PII. The principal PII is the data subject. Now, this data subject collects information collection, collects information. And one of the ways of collecting information could be through surveillance, like you have cameras everywhere, CCTV and all of these things. Okay, another way is interrogation, maybe during crime scene, these investigative films, crime scene movies. You see the way they interrogate criminals, force them, beat them up sometimes, interrogate them, collect information from them. Okay, and during this, all these phases, there could be what we call privacy threat. Okay, happening at this level, and here is the information processing. In the processing sector, we have what we call the aggregation, identification, insecurity, secondary use, exclusion. So we're going to talk about this, and this is called data repository. Data repository in the processing unit, where you have the big data being processed at this level. Here we have the information dissemination, in the transmission process, giving out the information and disclosing information, breaching confidentiality, and so many things happening here. Now, in the information disclosure, there could also be what we call the privacy threat. We're going to talk about this in the next phase. Breach of confidentiality, disclosure. Someone maybe can obtain your information and disclose it, and be threatening you, and be blackmailing you, and be doing so many things to you, and asking especially if they get your personal identifiable information. Some hotels in third world nations, they put secret cameras in hotel rooms, and they collect information that they're not supposed to collect from people. This is ethically wrong. This is super ethically wrong. And sometimes some of these hotels start blackmailing people to pay up, that if they don't pay up, they will release their information online. Okay, you can sue these people. Don't be ashamed. When this thing happen, you can just sue them because they are breaching your privacy. They invaded your privacy, and you can sue these people. So don't be afraid that, oh, you are scared, you don't know what to do. Trust me, you can sue these people. Okay, don't allow people to blackmail you for whatever reason. Get good lawyers to help you file a case. Okay, exposure, increases accessibility, blackmail, appropriation, distortions. People start extorting money from you and so on and so forth because they hold this sensitive information about you, and they threaten you. They will release them to the general public, and you're so scared that this information should not get to the public, and they start blackmailing and extorting money from you. And then here we have evasions. Evasions include intrusions and decisional interference. So all of these things, at every facet of this, we can have what we call the privacy threat happening at every phase. Now let's move on quickly. The next one is information collection. How do we call it? We've talked about this, the collection process. Now, in this collection process, information collection is not necessarily harmful, but can, in some cases, constitute a privacy threat. It's not as if to collect information is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. But some cases can constitute what? Threat, privacy threat. Now, two types of threat action can occur. One is surveillance. The other one is interrogation. Now, let's take a look at one after the other. In surveillance, like we said, the watching, the listening to, or the recording of individuals' activity. Like I already mentioned, in some hotels in third world nations, they put secret cameras to begin to watch what people are doing and looking at people's privacy, and start holding on to this information and blackmailing them and threatening them to release them online if the people don't pay up. So this kind of case, you sue them. You don't have to waste any time on this. Now we have what we call surveillance can also be problematic and a violations of the rights of privacy, especially if the surveillance is unknown to the individual. You see, if the surveillance is unknown to you, if there are cameras and you know there are cameras, no problem. If there are CCTV in a place and you already informed that there are CCTV, no problem, okay? Because at least you do not disclose your privacy, some things that are very private to you, like your things that are very sensitive that you don't want the general public to see, you do not disclose them. But if you're not informed or you don't know, and someone puts secret cameras, CCTV in a place that you have acquired or you've bought for, like, imagine you rent a house, you are a tenant, and the landlord puts secret cameras in your house, and everything you're doing is watching. With your wife, with your whatever is going on in your house, is watching. This is a big case. You can sue him and lock him up for years. Okay, so this type of surveillance is not allowed because the third party is not aware of what you're doing. Okay, so it's not allowed. It's violations of privacy and breach of security. So now let's go to interrogation. Interrogation could be the pressure of individual to divulge information. You can pressure people. You can beat them up. You can punish them. You can do so many things to them, to their body, so that in order to the force and be ordered duress to release some very sensitive information. Then we say inserting fields in a form or in an online registration process that they required in order to proceed. There are things that you have to fill in order to proceed. If you don't supply this information, you cannot proceed what you're doing. Now the individual is compelled, like you are forced somehow, because the way the information was construed on the portal in the web page, that you have to give some of your very vital and sensitive information that you are not supposed to give. So in this note, you're compared, at least pressured, to divulge information that you would prefer not to give. So these are kind of interrogatory way of collecting information from the individual. Let's move on quickly. Information process. Let's look at this facet. This facet, the information processing phase. This place. We've talked about this information collection. Okay, now let's talk about the information processing. Here we remember we have aggregation, identification, insecurity, secondary use, and exclusion. Now let's take a look at one after the other. Now the use, storage, and manipulation of data that have been collected. Okay, information processing is the use, the storage, and the manipulation of data that has been collected. So when you're using data that has been collected, you're processing information. When you're storing it, you're processing the information. And when you're manipulating the data to suit specific purposes, and you're also processing the information. Okay, now let's say when you come to engineering processing aspect, we have the sensor, the processor, where the transduction taking place in the phase, and then you have the output. Okay, we go to the processing unit is usually the processor, such as a microcontroller doing digital signal processing for you, or you have timers and all of these things doing digital signal processing for you when we are looking at this from the engineering perspective. Okay, now let's move on quickly. We say privacy issues arise from how data can have and already be collected, handled, and ability by processing to link the result back to the individual to whom it pertains. Okay, now potential sources of privacy threat in this area include some of the privacy threat in this area of information processing include number one, aggregation. Now aggregation of data about an individual in various databases allow anyone with access to the aggregated data to learn more about an individual that could be learned from separate or separately protected data set. So if data are aggregated, it's like grouping. You group the data. So if I have access to that database, I can access information beyond of other individuals that have been aggregated in that space. Okay, so this is aggregated data. Now, although potential sources of privacy threat in information processing is identification. Identification is possible with sufficient data to be able to aggregate data to form various sources and use that to identify persons who are not otherwise identified in the data set. So identification helps you is another unique methodology of sourcing out if persons that were not being aggregated in the data set. Now insecurity. Insecurity is also another potential sources of privacy threat. Insecurity is a source of privacy threat in the area of information processing. Now, insecurity refers to the improper protection and handling of personally identifiable information. Okay, not insecurity in terms of people carrying guns and shooting people. That's not what we're saying. We're talking about insecurity in the area of information processing. And we say this refers to the improper protection and handling of personally identifiable information. Then secondary use. Secondary use is also a potential source of privacy threat. It's also in the area of information processing. In the area of information processing, secondary use is a privacy threat. Now, what is the meaning of secondary use? Information about a person obtained for one purpose may be used or made available for other purposes without the consent of the person, without consulting the person upon which the personally identifiable information were collected from in the first case. So secondary use is a privacy threat in the area of information processing. Okay, it's a privacy threat in the area of information processing. Now let's go to exclusion. Exclusion is also a privacy threat in the area of information processing in the sense that it is the failure to provide individuals with notice and input about their records. You did not provide the person with notice or input about their. For example, someone did not give you quick notice and then suddenly he's coming to evacuate you from his house. You can sue the person as well. Okay, it's not allowed. It's not allowed in law. Okay, now let's move on quickly. Information dissemination. Now in the area of information dissemination, here we want to look at the privacy threat in this area. Remember, the privacy threat include the breach of confidentiality, disclosure, exposure, increased accessibility, blackmail, appropriation, distortion. Now let's take a look at them one after the other. Let's take a look at them. So another privacy threat in the area of information dissemination is disclosure. What is disclosure? Disclosure refers to the release of true information about a person. Okay, you go ahead to release information about a person without the person's consent. Okay, that's a disclosure in the area of the information dissemination. Like someone is trying to blackmail you and asking you to pay and you did not pay, he goes ahead to release those messages. Okay, so this is a disclosure and it's a privacy threat. It's a threat. Okay, then it's also the potential harm. We say the potential harm is damage to reputation or position in some form. Yeah, because when disclosure happens, the person is damaged somehow because probably what information that you will not ordinarily be willing to disclose to the general public has been released by someone to the general public. Okay, part of you will be damaged. Your reputation might be damaged, and so many things might happen that may juxtapose or every other opportunity that may ordinarily come your way. So disclosure is one of these privacy threats in the area of information dissemination. Another privacy threat in the area of information dissemination is the breach of confidentiality. The breach of confidentiality. The breach of confidentiality, here we're looking at a disclosure that involves the violation of trust in a relationship. It could be between husband and a wife. During your marriage time, you love each other, you have secrets with each other, then something happens, and then your partner, because something happened and you separated, all your secret, financial secret, whatever secret you have, every human being has secret, of course. Every human being that lives on the surface of earth have secret that you don't want another person to know. They may be good. It's not as if all secrets are bad. They may be good things, but you don't just want people to know. Okay, so when someone that you trust, could be between husband and wife, could be brothers, could be among brothers, it could be within families, because there is a dispute, there is quarrel, there is separation, and then the person went and disclosed all this information to the general public just because there is both of you have divorced or both of you have separated, and then disclose this. This is called breach of confidentiality. Okay, it's a disclosure, but this is a disclosure coming from a relationship between two persons. Someone you trust so much, and something happened, and then he releases your information to the general public. This is a breach of confidentiality. Another privacy threat in the area of information dissemination is exposure. Exposure is the process of exposing to others of certain physical and emotional attributes about a person. Physical attribute, oh, this person, do you know he has this kind of sickness he used to cover with his cloth? Oh, this person has this, Oh, this person has this person, You're exposing to others certain physical, or it may not even be a physical problem. It could be an emotional story, or someone confided in you about, someone told you some secret, You know, someone told you some stress they're going through, some family secrets, some stress, some problems they're going through, and then you went and disclosed all this information to another person or to the general public. This type is called exposure. You've exposed the person of what he has done, or what is happening to him. Okay, another privacy threat in the area of information dissemination is increased accessibility. Increased accessibility. Increased accessibility is when information that is already publicly available is made easier to access. It's already there, but maybe people cannot, there are things that are there, they are not easy to access. Someone that just brought it out, tagged so many people, tag a lot of people, like just to prove a point, or just to show off, or just to punish another person, or just to tarnish the image of another person. So they somehow make something that was already in public, but it maybe probably still not very, very available. Someone got a hold of it and share it and make it easily accessible by others by probably tagging them, whatever terminology that that platform uses, and it uses it pinging, and that you can ping the information so everyone can easily see it. So many terminology can be used in this context to express this increased accessibility. Now, another privacy threat in the area of information dissemination is blackmail. Blackmail, the threat of disclosure. Someone is threatening you that you will release your video, maybe a video of something that is not good. Someone is threatening you that you release your voice audio. Maybe you're having meetings, you're planning as politicians, and then you have some secret talk about what you do to someone, how you do this, and someone is got a hold of it and is threatening, is blackmailing, is doing. So all of these they are called privacy threat. They are privacy threat in information dissemination. And although privacy threat in the area of information dissemination is appropriation. Now, what is appropriation? Appropriation involves the use of person's identity or personality for the purpose of another person. Appropriation is the use of someone's identity or personality for the purpose of another person. This one is maybe someone is impersonation, right? Impersonation could fall under this category, and so many other examples that can fall here. Okay, another privacy threat that falls under the area of information dissemination is distortion. Distortion is the manipulations of the way a person is perceived and judged by others, and involves the victim being inaccurately exposed to the public. You know, one of the big agency or big institutions that are very responsible for distortion is the media. You know, the media can portray to you the way they want you to think. The way they want you to reason. The media can configure you. The media can actually destroy any personality that they want to destroy. They can just be somehow stylishly be presenting the person in that manner. Okay, and then the public will have a perception about that person in that manner. Okay, just like the way we have, the media destroy using movie. Okay, you see, America always use Mexico as a black sheep in most of their movie, like drug lord area or this kind of. So naturally, people believe Mexico is a nuisance, is a total nuisance. Okay, so they can use either movie, entertainment, media to configure you and position you in a way they want people to see you. Okay, the media can actually. That's why it's not good, to be honest, to always come on social media or come to any media and be just insulting your country. My country is not good. My country is that. My country is stupid. My country. Every country has its own good side and bad sides. Okay, every country. We know we're not there yet. If you're from the third world nation, from Africa, but that's not to say. Yeah, we can say it to ourselves, but we don't have to tell the whole world that we are useless, okay? Because if the media help you to echo your statement, then you have yourself to blame, okay? They can, see the media, the way media portray Islam, for example. That's also another good example. They make Islam look like terrorism organization or terrorist playground. Okay, this is media. They want people to hate Islam, and this is what they do. This is called distortion. You portraying a whole religion as terrorism. Okay, this is, and the novice and naivety of human people, human race, they naively believe that perception and judge every Muslim with that understanding. Not only on religious grounds. I've used so many examples. Okay, now let's move on quickly. Evasion involves impeachment directly on the individual. You see, people usually say, don't invade my privacy. Do not invade my privacy. Evasion is just an impeachment directly on the individual. Okay? And then the potential sources of privacy threat in this area could include intrusion. So evasion has a privacy threat. Intrusion is one of those privacy threat in the area of evasion, and decisional interference is also another privacy threat in the area of evasion. Now let's move on quickly because we have a long way to go quickly. Okay, now in this context we have the subject, we have the data, we have the data action. This is called figure 4.2. It's called privacy characterization. The subject is the principal personally identifiable information. The data is the information collection context, okay? And then the data action could be the information processing and at the same time information dissemination process. Okay, now let's move on quickly. We don't have to be looking at organization and looking at what they constitute. Now let's take a look at the problematic data action. The problematic data action. Before we look at that, this is figure 4.3, which is problematic data actions and harms. Okay, problematic data actions and harm. Now let's take a look at those data actions, the problematic ones, and then their privacy harm. What harm they can cause. For example, appropriation, distortion, induced disclosure. These ones can cause loss of the harm they can cause. Privacy harm they can cause is loss of self-determination, and then loss of autonomy, exclusion. You exclude yourself from the public. You are hiding. You are shy. You'll be disgraced. You'll be embarrassed, and so on and so forth. It could also lead to loss of liberty. You no longer have your freedom. You are hiding. You are hiding from the public. You don't want people to see you. And then physical harm. It could even lead to physical harm. Even some people can kill themselves. Okay, can commit suicide. So these have huge implications. Now, insecurity can cause both insecurity, surveillance. All this one can cause discrimination. Insecurity can cause discrimination, such as stigmatization, power imbalance, and so on and so forth. Surveillance can cause loss of trust, okay, and so on and so forth. The unanticipated revelation or wanted restriction can cause loss of trust, economic loss, and so on and so forth. So let's move on quickly. And then when we do a relationship between privacy threat and potential privacy harms, then we can have one on one hand and the other on the other hand. Appropriation can lead to other harm. The harm it can cause, appropriation can cause this harm. Power imbalance, appropriation can cause loss of trust. Appropriation can cause economic loss. These are privacy threats, and why the one on the horizontal are called privacy harms. These are privacy harms, and these are privacy threats. Now let's look at distortion. Distortion can cause loss of liberty. Distortion can cause stigmatization. Distortion can cause power imbalance, and so on and so forth. Then induced disclosure can cause loss of autonomy, can also cause power imbalance. Then insecurity can cause stigmatization. The harm insecurity can cause is stigmatization. Another harm insecurity can cause is loss of trust. Another harm insecurity can cause is economic loss. Then surveillance. Surveillance is a privacy threat, and one of the loss it can cause is loss of autonomy. Another loss it can cause is loss of liberty. Another loss it can cause is power imbalance. Another loss it can cause is loss of trust. The unanticipated revelation. It can cause loss of autonomy. This it can also cause stigmatization. It can also cause power imbalance, and it can also cause loss of trust. And then unwarranted restriction can cause exclusion. It can cause loss of trust, and it can cause economic loss. Okay, so this figure is showing a relationship between privacy threat and privacy harm. Remember, there's an assignment here. So I've helped you in the assignment by explaining this. Ordinarily, I was not supposed to explain this figure. You're supposed to go figure it out and answer the number one assignment question. Okay, there's something you need to explain with this. Now let's move on quickly. Threat sources. The NIST SP 800-20, it's a guide for conducting risk assessment, defines a threat source as either one of the following. Before we look at the categories of source of threat, let's look at what we mean by this threat source. The intent, or what we mean by threat. The intent and the method targeted are the intentional exploitation of a vulnerability. Okay? The intent and the method targeted are the intentional exploitation of a vulnerability. And also it could be a situation and a method that may accidentally trigger a vulnerability. So you can say threats is a situation and a method that may accidentally trigger vulnerability. Now let's take a look at the sources. Okay, the source is the category source. One is adversarial. Okay, which means individual, group, organizations, or stages that seek to exploit the organization's dependence on cyber resources. Okay, then another one is accidental. Accidental source of threat is actions taken by individual in the course of executing their everyday responsibility. Then, during the process of taking an action in your everyday responsibility, you may come into an accidental threat. Then another source of threat category is the environmental source of threat, which includes the natural disasters and the failures of critical infrastructure on which the organization depends. Okay, and also those that are outside the control of the organization, both what you depend internally and externally. Okay, so these are called environmental, and they are usually natural disaster. For example, during tornado, during earthquake, and all of this, all your organization network backbone will be broken down, right? So this will result to threat, environmental threat. Okay, now structural threat. Source of threat includes failures of equipment or the environmental controls or software due to AG or resource depletion. Your resources are getting finished, like your oil is getting finished, for example. I'm just using that as an example. Okay, your petroleum oil is getting finished, getting depleted, or the system is AG, your computers are AG, your software is getting outdated and things like that. There are newer versions. Okay, all this one we constitute a structural threat category. Is that okay? And so on and so forth. Now let's move on for the sake of time quickly. Now, identifying threat. Information on environmental threat is typically available from varieties of government and trade group. So if you want things that can cause threat, these informations are found in government sites and so on and so forth, and some trade group. Accidental or structural threats are less easily documented, but generally can be predicted with reasonable accuracy. You can predict them with reasonable accuracy because we do not have so much that is in record in order for us to use as case studies and in order for us to predict future recurrence. Then apart from structural and accidental threat, with respect to adversarial threat, organizations find it difficult to get reliable information on past events and to assess future trends of varieties of reasons. Okay, so some organizations find it difficult to get reliable information on the past event that has happened in order for them to be able to predict the future using probability to predict the future. Okay, so we can look for some of these adversarial threat. Okay, because one of the reasons why they cannot find information on this is that some organizations are very reluctant to report security events. When anything happens, some organizations are very reluctant to report it because they want to save the corporate image. They want to save the image of the organization. They want to save the image. For example, like the banking sector. If anything happens to them, security threat, someone hack into the bank, they will be afraid to disclose it to the general public because they don't want people to start feeling, oh, this bank is not safe, and they don't want people to start withdrawing their money away from their accounts. So this type of organizations or corporations, they will be very reluctant to disclose some of these threats. Because of this, we do not have enough data, that to carry a proper research on what is going on in this aspect. And these are called adversarial threats. Okay, another one is some attack may be carried out or at least attempted without being detected by the victim until much later. Okay, some attack may even happen to you, you don't even know. You don't know. Okay, maybe later on you're going to find out that something happened to you and it will be too late. Threat continues to evolve as adversaries adapt to new security controls and discover new techniques. Okay, now let's move on quickly. There's what we call Computer Emergency Response Team, SAT. Okay, Computer Emergency Response Team. They are also called Computer Emergency Readiness Team. Okay, it's like a cooperative vector that ventures to collect information about system vulnerability, known threats, and disseminate it to system managers. Okay, this Computer Emergency Response Team, they ventures to collect information about system vulnerability, to find the vulnerability in a system and then report them, these threats, and disseminate them to the system manager. Hackers also routinely read SAT reports. Hackers, they read the SAT report so that they know how to improve their hacking skills. So it's important for system administrators. So if hackers can read the SAT report, SAT means Computer Emergency Response Team. So if hackers can be reading SAT reports, then you as a system analyst or a system administrator or a system engineer, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? You have to constantly read the SAT report to quickly verify and apply all software patches to discover vulnerability or to avert vulnerable areas. Is that okay? Then one of the most useful of these organizations is the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. Okay, the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. So they are very quick to make use of the SAT report, which is in partnership between the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the public and private sectors, intended to coordinate the response to security threats from the internet. So they help to coordinate the security threats from the internet in the United States. Now let's take a look at this. Another excellent resource is the SAT Coordination Center, which grew from the Computer Emergency Response Team formed by the Defensive Advanced Research Project Agency. Okay, so this is another opportunity or area where this finds its use. Now, the SAT Coordination Center website provides good information on internet security threats, vulnerability, and attack statistics. So if you are a system administrator, you should always go to SAT Coordination Center, okay, their website, and download their reports, security report, coordinations, and everything, so that you know possible area in which attackers can attack you. They can create threat. They can areas where your system can be vulnerable, and read about attack statistics in order to improve your system. Now let's go to a helpful report. These are some published reports that can help you if you're a system administrator. You have to read all these reports regularly in order to find useful information that can help prevent vulnerability, threat, attack, and so on and so forth. Some of these are the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, the Threat Horizon Report, an INSA Threat Landscape Report, TrustWave Global Security Report, Cisco Annual Cybersecurity Report, Fortinet Threat Landscape Report. So these are some of the helpful reports that can help you prevent some of these threat and vulnerable areas of attack. Now let's take a look at vulnerability category. Now we go to vulnerability. We'll be talking about attack, and harm, privacy harm, and so on and so forth. Now let's take a look at vulnerability. Vulnerability category include technical vulnerability, include human resource vulnerability, include physical and environmental vulnerability, and includes operational vulnerability. What do we mean by this? Okay, this meaning your system can be vulnerable from your technical side. There may be flaws. You know the meaning of vulnerability, right? Flaws. Your flaws in your design, flaws in your implementations, flaws in your configurations. Okay, these ones are technical. So when there are flaws in your system design, when there are flaws, mistakes, errors in your system implementations and in the configuration of the software and or in hardware components, including the application system or the application software, system software, communication software, computing equipment, communication equipment, and embedded devices, all of this, whichever way, whether it's in the hardware component part or in the software component part or in the algorithm design, development, and implementations, where there are mistakes, there are flaws, there are loopholes. When there are loopholes, then you have what we call, you are vulnerable technically. You are technically vulnerable. Okay? Now, in the human resource vulnerability, we say the key person dependency, the gaps in the awareness. You know, you have some staff, this happens a lot in the bank. You walk into a banking hall, even some of the officers, they don't even understand even what they're doing in the bank, with all due respect. Some of the officers, they don't join or they don't have adequate training. So so attackers already know. All these people that fraud you by calling you and say, they are calling you from your bank. They first of all walk to the banking hall. They read it, they study these things, they find the weaknesses, how in the human resource, they see how this is, there are loopholes, there are gaps, there are flaws in the human resource aspect, in the human resource aspect of the organization, and then they can act on behalf of the organization and they train themselves better to defraud other people and create threats and other things and make the users of that system to be vulnerable because there was weakness. There was weakness in the human resource aspect of the system. Now let's go to physical and environmental vulnerability. Now these are the potential weaknesses or flaws that are emanating from the physical and the environment upon which you are operating. The insufficient physical access control. You don't have enough access control, poor siting of equipment. These are physical now. Poor siting of equipment, inadequate temperature and humidity. This is environmental. Inadequate temperature and humidity controls and inadequately conditioned electrical power. Okay, all of this one, when people cite error here, then they find how to hit you hard. And because you're vulnerable in this aspect. The operational vulnerability. How do you become very vulnerable operationally? Lack of change management, inadequate separation of duties. You see, you become a jack of all trades. You give your staff a lot of work, and then people come to your office. They notice all of this. They find the weaknesses. Then they already know there's you're vulnerable operationally. So they find a way to hit you hard. Lack of control over software installation. You install the software that was installed for you. You don't have adequate manpower to actually be in control of this software. Lack of control over media handling and storage. Lack of control of system communication. Inadequate access control or weakness in access control procedure. Inadequate recording, and so on and so forth. All these are operational vulnerability. Now let's move on quickly. Vulnerability categories. One, we look at the business continuity and the compliance vulnerability. The first one in the category of vulnerability, we say the business continuity and compliance vulnerability. Okay, in this area, misplaced, messy, or inadequate process for appropriate management of business risk, inadequate business continuity, contingency planning, and inadequate monitoring and evaluation for compliance with the governing policies and regulations. So you can be vulnerable in this aspect. When you misplace any of your probably could be your business model, your business plan, your working operational methodologies, whatever you have, and once it's misplaced or messy or inadequate processes for appropriate management of business risk, when people see all this, they already see that you're vulnerable in this area. Now let's move on to another type of vulnerability category, which is called policy and procedure vulnerability. Usually, we all know what policies are. Policies, privacy policy and procedures that are inadequate to fully protect personally identifiable information create this type of policy and procedure vulnerability, including your conformance with the FIPS. Okay. Then another one, the third one is data set vulnerability, weakness in de-identification measures, weakness or inadequate masking of personally identifiable information in statistical data sets, and inadequate protection against discovery of personally identifiable information by analysis of multiple data sets. So when all this one happens, we have what we call data set vulnerability. Now let's take a look at this from the diagrammatical point of view. Figure 4.5 looks at locations of privacy vulnerability. Locations. This is the PII principle, the person who is collecting the data. Okay. There's a linkage between the person and the organization itself. This is like the whole organization. In this organization, we have what we call the organization's IT infrastructure here. All this one is like attack, like threat, attack. People like about to attack you in all these areas. Then here is the storage. We have IT infrastructure here. We have the storage. We have the processing unit here. So you're vulnerable here. You're vulnerable here. You're vulnerable here. You have a link between to the third party or individual, any organization with which you are giving dissemination information to. They're also vulnerable here. Then we have IoT, the Internet of Things infrastructure here. All devices and everything connected in the system, internet connection. So they're also vulnerable here. So this here you have what we call the link to the cloud. Because most big organizations, their data are stored in the cloud, like Waidsum University. Okay, the data are stored in the cloud. Okay, it's cloud computing. So this is where big IT infrastructure, their data are in the data bank in the cloud. Okay, so it's still vulnerable because once the attacker study every loopholes or weaknesses in all of this that we've discussed, then they can find their way into this. Now let's look at what we call the National Vulnerability Database. National Vulnerability Database and the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, CVSS, Common Vulnerability Scoring System. Then NVD is the National Vulnerability Database. So the National Vulnerability Database is a comprehensive list of known technical vulnerability in systems, in the hardware, in the software, and it covers both security and privacy vulnerability. So you can Google National Vulnerability Database in the United States. So you find the technical errors and the flaws and loopholes that can happen to an entire system, that can happen only specifically to the hardware of the system or the software of the system. And these vulnerabilities covers both the security aspect, information security aspect, and the privacy aspect of information. Then besides that, we have what we call Common Vulnerability Scoring System. The Common Vulnerability Scoring System provides an open framework for communicating the characteristics of vulnerability. First of all, number one is that the CVSS, which is Common Vulnerability Scoring System, defines a vulnerability as a bug or a bug, depending on how you call it, a flaw, a weakness or an exposure of an application or a system device or a service that could lead to failure of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So all of this is what we call the vulnerability. Something, there's a bug, there is flaw, there's weakness, there's an exposure to the entire application or to the entire system device or to the entire system or to system device, or there is a exposure to the service, and this could lead to failure of the confidentiality of the personally identifiable information, could lead to failure of the integrity of the personally identifiable information, could lead to failure of the availability of personally identifiable information. So all of this is termed, or the whole of this in summary is termed vulnerability. Now, it's also the model attempt to ensure repeated and accurate measurement while enabling user to view the underlying vulnerability characteristics used to generate a numerical score. Then it also provides a common measurement system for industry, organization, the government, even individuals, requiring accurate and consistent vulnerability exploit and impact scores. So they can all have access to this. Now let's take a look at the common vulnerability scoring system metrics. In this we have what we call the base metric group. The base metric group is divided into three. The third one is not mentioned here. We're going to talk about it. We have what we call the exploitability, the impact, and the scope. The exploitability includes the attack vector. Attack vector is like your network, adjacent, local, physical, all of this. We're going to describe it out. There exploitability include attack complexity, whether it's high attack or low attack. High attack is like you loss of some data. Low attack is loss of some data. High attack is loss of entire data in your entire system. You've lost the entire information. You'll be completely taken out. You've lost everything. Okay? And then we have what we call the privilege required, none, low, or high. Okay? Then we have user interaction, none or is required. So all these are types of exploitability in base metric group. Then in impact we have confidentiality. Confidentiality impact, the impact could be either high, meaning you lost everything, low, or you lost some. None means you didn't lose anyone. Integrity impact could be high, low, and none. Availability impact could be high, low, none, and so on and so forth, depending on what you lost. The third one in the base metric is scope. I already mentioned that. I said there are three. We have exploitability, impact, and scope. Scope, whether it's changed or is unchanged. So this is scope. There, beside the base metric for scoring the common vulnerability scoring system metrics, we also have another metrics called the temporal metric group. The temporal metric group has what we call the exploit code, maturity. The maturity you have not defined, and so on and so forth. Then you have remediation level. We have report confidence, and so on and so forth. In temporal metric measurement system for common vulnerability system. Then we have environmental metric group, where you have confidentiality requirement, you have integrity requirement, and you have availability requirement. This is about requirement. Environmental metric group, it's about requirement. We're going to touch each and every one. The first one is the base metric group, like we mentioned here. The base metric group. Okay. Now let's quickly come to the base metric group. The base metric group represent the intrinsic characteristics of vulnerability that are constant over time and across users' environment. These attacks or these areas of vulnerability are constant in the entire system, okay, or in your entire environment where you're doing your work. It consists of three sets of metrics. Exploitability, which we mentioned, and the exploitability is a metric that looks at attack vector, which is like your network and so on and so forth. Okay, I've already looked at each individual. Privilege require, attack complexity, user interaction. We measure all of this. Other exploitability. Now let's look at the second one for the base metric, which is called the impact. The impact, this metric indicates the degree of impact on the primary security objective, such as the primary security objective, your confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So the metric indicate the degree of impact on this primary objective, security objective. Okay, if there is huge attack, high attack on confidentiality of the data or integrity or availability. So this one look at the impact on the primary security objectives. In each of these cases, the score reflects the worst outcome if more than one component is affected. That means the scope is changed. If more than one is affected, the scope will change. If no more than one, the scope will remain unchanged. Okay, now let's go to scope. Scope, the metric is grouped under the base metric group, although it's somewhat independent, and it's a remainder of the group. It refers to the ability for a vulnerability in one software component to impart resources beyond its means and privileges. And let's quickly look at the temporal metric system. We run through quickly, okay? The temporal metric system includes, first of all, temporal metric system or metric group represent the characteristics of vulnerability that change over time, but not among user environment. This one, you remember the base metric, they don't change over time. They are constant in the entire characteristics of the system. This one, they change over time, but not among the user environment. It consists of three metrics. Okay, three things were used for the measurement. One is exploit code maturity. Okay, the second one is remediation level. The third one is report confidence. Okay, now let's take a look at the first one, which is exploit code maturity. This metric measures the current state of exploit techniques or code availability. Okay, the current state of exploit techniques or the code availability. How available are your code or that we are used to program your system? Then the levels reflect the degree to which the exploit is available and usable for exploiting the vulnerability. Now let's take a look at the second one, which is the remediation level. Remediation level measures the degree to which remediation is available. Remediation level is just to measure the degree to which remediation is available. Then the report confidence is the measure of the degree of confidence in the existence of the vulnerability and the credibility of the known technical details. So this temporal metric group actually kind of, like we said, exploit code maturity, remediation level, kind of like check whether your system is okay or not. Then we have a environmental metric group. The environmental metric group capture the characteristics of vulnerability that are associated with a user's IT environment. Okay, how much vulnerable are present or are there in the user's IT environment. It enables the analyst to customize the CVSS score depending on the importance of the affected IT asset to user's organization. Okay, now let's move on quickly. So in summary, for today's class, we've talked about, or we've looked at the changes in information technology and how these have increased the threat to privacy. Information technology has improved information processing dissemination, but it has also increased the privacy threat. We also make a presentation on the types of privacy threat and individual and organization, what they face in the area of privacy threat. We also list and discuss various categories of privacy vulnerability, and then we also explain the purpose of national vulnerability database and how this organization can use it for open method for human rights. Okay, so that's all for our today's class, and thank you for coming to class today. Thank you.